She froze the moment he stepped to the counter. Not because she recognized him, but because fear had already taught her what men like him could do. The Mafia boss noticed her hands shaking as she scanned his items. Too fast, too careful, eyes glued to the register. When their eyes met, she flinched. That was when he realized. The fear had nothing to do with him, and everything to do with what would happen after he left. The convenience store sat on the corner of 8th and Monroe, wedged between a closed laundromat and a check-cashing place with bars on the windows. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed like trapped insects, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made even fresh produce look days old. Johnny DeSantis didn't usually shop for himself. He had people for that. People who filled his refrigerator, stocked his wine cellar, ensured his espresso machine never ran dry. But tonight, at 11:47 p.m., he'd been driving back from a meeting that had run late. The kind of meeting that happened in back rooms of restaurants that stayed open just for him. And he'd realized he was out of cigarettes, the American spirits he preferred, the light blue pack. His driver had offered to stop anywhere, but Gianni had waved him off. He'd noticed this store before, on this route he sometimes took, when he wanted to think, when he wanted to drive through neighborhoods that reminded him where he'd come from, even if he could never go back. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. The store was nearly empty. One customer, an older man in a security guard uniform, stood near the refrigerated section, deciding between energy drinks. The man glanced up when Gianni entered, then quickly looked away. People always looked away. Gianni had that effect. 6'2", broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from marble and then cracked by experience. His suit was Italian, his watch was Swiss, and his presence filled rooms whether he wanted it to or not. He moved toward the counter, scanning the shelves behind it for his brand. That's when he saw her. The cashier stood perfectly still behind the register. Her hands pressed flat against the counter like she was trying to keep herself from floating away. She was young, mid-20s maybe, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had started to come loose hours ago. Her name tag said Maya in faded letters, but it wasn't her name that caught his attention. It was the way she was breathing, short, shallow breaths through her nose, the kind of breathing people did when they were trying not to be noticed, when they were trying to disappear. Gianni had seen that kind of breathing before, in people who worked for him when they'd made mistakes, in people who owed money they couldn't pay, in people who knew that violence was coming and were calculating their chances of survival. "Evening," he said, his voice carefully neutral. She jumped. Actually jumped, like his voice had been a gunshot. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, her hand flying to her chest. "I'm sorry, I was just—" She stopped herself, swallowing hard. "How can I help you?" Her voice trembled on the last word. Gianni studied her more carefully. Her eyes were green but ringed with the kind of exhaustion that came from not sleeping, not from working late. She had a small bruise on her left wrist, just visible where her sleeve had ridden up. Her fingernails were bitten down to the quick. "American spirits," he said, keeping his voice even. "Light blue." "Yes, of course. Right away." She turned too quickly, stumbling slightly as she reached for the cigarettes on the shelf behind her. Her hands shook as she grabbed the pack, not the subtle tremor of nervousness, but the visible shake of genuine fear. She was terrified. But not of him. Johnny knew what it looked like when people were afraid of him specifically. They became very still, very polite, very careful not to make eye contact. They measured every word. They tried to give him what he wanted before he had to ask. This was different. Maya wasn't looking at him at all. She was looking past him toward the door, then toward the security camera mounted in the corner, then toward a door marked "Employees Only" at the back of the store. She scanned the cigarettes with trembling fingers. 10:47, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Gianni pulled out his wallet, not the expensive leather one he usually carried, but a simpler black one he kept in his car for occasions like this, and handed her a 20. Her fingers brushed his as she took it, and she flinched again. "I'm sorry," she said again for the third time in as many minutes. "I'm sorry, "For what?" Johnny asked. She froze, her eyes going wide. What? What are you apologizing for? She stared at him, like he'd asked her to solve a calculus equation. I don't. The door at the back of the store opened. Maya's entire body went rigid. A man emerged from the back room, early 40s, thinning hair, cheap dress shirt with sweat stains under the arms. He had the soft, doughy build of someone who'd never worked hard physically but compensated with cruelty. His eyes were small and mean. He looked at Maya first, then at Gianni, then back at Maya. "Everything okay out here?" he asked. His voice had a false cheerfulness to it, like a children's show host who hated children. "Yes, Mr. Patterson," Maya said immediately, too quickly. "Everything's fine. I was just helping this customer," Patterson said, his eyes still on her. "Good. That's good." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Remember what we talked about, Maya. Customer service, it's everything." "Yes, sir. Everything. I understand." Patterson's smile widened slightly, and Gianni saw Maya's shoulders hunch forward, like she was trying to make herself smaller. Then, Patterson looked at Gianni, and his expression shifted. Not to fear, he clearly didn't recognize who Gianni was, but to a kind of obsequious friendliness that Gianni had learned to hate years ago. "We appreciate your business, sir," Patterson said. "Maya's one of our best. She knows how important our customers are." Gianni said nothing. He simply held Patterson's gaze until the other man looked away. "Well," Patterson said, his smile faltering slightly, "I'll let you finish up. Maya, I'll be in my office if you need anything." He disappeared back through the door, but Gianni noticed he left it slightly ajar, just enough to listen. Maya's hands were shaking so badly now that she could barely count out his change. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. She stopped, pressing her lips together hard enough to turn them white. Gianni took his change and his cigarettes, but he didn't leave. "How late are you open?" he asked. 24 hours, Maya said automatically. Then she seemed to realize what she'd said, and fear flashed across her face again. "But we're usually pretty quiet after midnight. Most people, they go to the bigger stores, the ones with more selection. I mean, if you need something else, if the cigarettes aren't..." "They're fine," Gianni said. She nodded quickly, still not quite looking at him. Gianni walked toward the door. The security guard had already left, his energy drink in hand. The store was empty now, except for Maya, and whoever was behind that door. He paused at the exit. Then he turned back. Maya was watching him leave, her entire body tense, like she was counting down the seconds until he was gone. "What time do you get off?" Gianni asked. The color drained from her face. "I'm sorry." Her voice was barely audible now. "Your shift," Gianni clarified. "When does it end?" I close at 6 a.m. She was gripping the edge of the counter now, her knuckles white. "But I don't..." "That's a long shift," Gianni said. "Yes, sir." "You do this every night?" She hesitated, like the question was a trap. "Most nights." Gianni nodded slowly. Then he left, but as he walked to his car, parked in the shadow of a broken streetlight, he noticed 3 things. First, there were cameras mounted at every corner of the building, far more than a small convenience store would typically need. Second, there was a newer model BMW parked behind the building in a spot marked manager. The car was worth more than this store probably made in 6 months. Third, through the window he could see Maya still standing at the register, perfectly still, staring at the door, like she was waiting for something terrible to happen. And Gianni DeSantis, who had built his empire on noticing things other people missed, who had survived 3 decades in a world where the observant lived and the oblivious died, recognized something in her stillness. He recognized the posture of prey. He sat in his car for 5 minutes, watching. Nothing happened. No one came or left. Maya remained frozen behind her register, occasionally glancing toward that back room. Finally, Gianni started his engine and drove away. But he didn't go home. Instead, he made a phone call. "Tony," he said when his head of security answered, "I need you to look into something." Gianni didn't return to the store the next night. He'd learned a long time ago that patterns made you predictable, and predictable made you dead. Besides, he had other business to attend to, a shipment that needed clearing through customs, a restaurant owner who thought he could renegotiate their arrangement, a city councilman who needed to be reminded why he'd been elected. But on the third night, at 11:52 p.m., he found himself driving down 8th Street again. The store looked exactly the same. Same flickering neon sign advertising lottery tickets, same grime on the windows, same sense of barely controlled decay that seemed to permeate this whole neighborhood. Different car behind the building, though, not the BMW. A beat-up Honda Civic with a dented passenger door. Johnny parked and went inside. The same bell chimed, the same fluorescent lights buzzed, and there was Maya, behind the same register, wearing the same exhausted fear like a second skin. She looked up when he entered, and something flickered across her face. Not quite recognition, they'd only met once, but something close to it. A kind of weary familiarity with the type of man who walked into convenience stores after midnight in expensive suits. "Good evening," she said. Her voice was steadier tonight, more practiced. Gianni noticed immediately that her makeup was heavier than before, covering something on her cheek. Her sleeves were longer too, despite the warmth of the store. "Coffee," he said, gesturing toward the self-serve station in the corner. "Of course, help yourself." She almost smiled, but it died before it reached her eyes. "Cream and sugar are on the counter." Johnny walked to the coffee station. The coffee looked like it had been sitting there since the morning shift, thick and dark as motor oil. He poured himself a cup anyway, not because he wanted it, but because it gave him an excuse to spend more time in the store. To watch. There was one other customer tonight, a young woman browsing the magazine rack, occasionally checking her phone. A college student, probably, killing time between shifts or classes. Johnny added cream to his coffee, stirring slowly, while he observed the store's layout in his peripheral vision. The security cameras weren't just numerous. They were expensive, high definition, the kind used by banks and casinos, not corner stores. And they were all angled toward the register, toward the door, toward the aisles, not toward the back room. Interesting. He walked back to the counter. Maya was entering something into the computer, her fingers moving quickly across the keys. When she saw him approach, she straightened immediately, her hand moving to smooth her ponytail. That gesture. He'd seen it before too. Women in his clubs did it when certain men approached. A kind of preemptive grooming, making themselves presentable for someone whose displeasure had consequences. "Just the coffee?" she asked. "And these?" He grabbed a pack of gum from the display near the register. He didn't chew gum, but it didn't matter. She rang it up. Her hands were steadier tonight, but he noticed she kept glancing at the time on the register display. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes until midnight. "375, she said. Johnny handed her a 5. "Keep the change." "Oh, I can't." She stopped herself, pressing her lips together. "Thank you. That's very kind." But she didn't put the money in the tip jar near the register. Instead, she carefully folded it and slipped it into her pocket, glancing toward the back room as she did. The door was closed tonight, but Gianni could see light underneath it. "Busy night?" he asked. Maya's eyes widened slightly, like she wasn't used to customers making conversation. "Not really. It's usually pretty quiet after midnight, until the bars close around 2. She paused. "You work late?" "I keep irregular hours," Johnny said. "Me too." She almost smiled again. "Irregular is one way to put it. How long have you worked here?" The question seemed to catch her off. "Guard. 8 months, almost 9 now. Long shifts." "Yeah." She looked down at the counter. "The money's okay, though, better than most places." It was a lie. Johnny could hear it in her voice, see it in the way she wouldn't meet his eyes. Whatever this job paid her, it wasn't worth 10-hour night shifts in a neighborhood where most businesses closed at sundown. "You from around here?" he asked. Now she did look at him, suspicion creeping into her expression. "Why?" "Just making conversation." She hesitated, clearly debating whether to answer. "I grew up about 2 hours north, came here for school. College. Community college. But I had to." She stopped, shaking her head. "Sorry, I shouldn't talk about this. You probably want to get going." "I'm not in a hurry." The suspicion deepened. Most people are. After midnight, I'm not most people. Something changed in her expression then. A flicker of, what? Recognition? Warning? No, she said quietly. I guess you're not. She knew not who he was maybe, but what he was. People could sense it the same way animals sensed predators. The capacity for violence, even when it was perfectly controlled, left a signature that people felt in their hindbrain. The college student came to the counter, ready to pay for her magazine. Maya shifted immediately into customer service mode, smiling, making small talk, counting change, playing her part perfectly. Johnny stepped aside, sipping his terrible coffee, watching. When the student left, Maya was alone with him again. The store fell silent except for the buzzing lights and the hum of refrigerator motors. I should let you get back to work, Johnny said. Relief flooded her face. Okay, thank you for stopping in. He walked toward the door, then stopped. That bruise on your cheek, he said, not turning around. The one you're covering with makeup. How'd you get it? The silence that followed was absolute. When he turned, Maya was staring at him with an expression he recognized instantly. It was the look people got when they realized they'd been seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. I walked into a door, she said automatically. No, you didn't. I'm clumsy. No, you're not. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back furiously. Please, she whispered. Please just go. Who did it? Nobody. It was an accident. Maya, please. Her voice broke. Please, you have to go. You have to. The door to the back room opened. Different man this time. Younger than Patterson, maybe early 30s, with the kind of lean, wiry build that came from manual labor or drugs. His eyes were bloodshot, and he moved with the jerky energy of someone who was high or about to be. He looked at Maya first, then at Gianni, then back at Maya. Who's this? He asked. Just a customer, Derek, Maya said quickly. He was just leaving. Derek's eyes narrowed. Little late for customers. Stores open 24 hours, Johnny said evenly. Yeah? Derek moved closer, and Johnny saw Maya stiffen. Well, we appreciate your business and all, but maybe you should, take it somewhere else next time. We're pretty full up here. The store was empty. Derek, Maya said, her voice tight with warning. He's a customer. We can't. I said, Derek interrupted, his voice hardening, that he should take his business elsewhere. There was a moment, just a moment, where Gianni considered showing this man exactly who he was talking to, where he considered making him understand the hierarchy of power that existed in this city, and where a strung-out convenience store employee ranked on it. But then he looked at Maya and saw pure terror in her eyes. Not terror that Derek would hurt him, terror that Gianni would hurt Derek, and that she would pay for it afterward. So instead, Gianni simply nodded. Have a good night, he said. He left, but as he walked to his car, he watched through the window as Derek grabbed Maya's arm, the same arm that had the bruise, and leaned in close to say something that made her whole body go rigid. She nodded, quickly, repeatedly, like a child being scolded. Derek released her and disappeared back into the office. Maya stood there for a long moment, her hand pressed to her arm where he'd grabbed it. Then she looked toward the window, toward where Gianni's car was parked in the darkness. And for just a second, their eyes met. Gianni saw the question in her gaze. Why did you ask? Why do you care? He saw something else too. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope that someone had finally noticed, that someone had finally seen. Gianni started his car and drove away. But this time he made 3 phone calls. First, to Tony again. I need everything. The store, the employees, the owner, the finances, everything. Second, to his accountant. How hard would it be to buy a convenience store? Third, to someone who didn't ask questions and didn't leave traces. I need surveillance. Discreet. Just watching. Because Gianni DeSantis had recognized something in Maya's eyes that he hadn't expected to recognize. He'd seen the same look in his own mother's eyes, 30 years ago when his father would come home drunk. The same calculation. How long can I endure this? How much can I survive? And he'd made himself a promise when he was 14 years old. watching his mother flinch at shadows. Never again, not if he could stop it. The information came in pieces over the next week. Tony delivered the first report 3 days later, spreading papers across Gianni's desk in his office above the restaurant on Mulberry Street. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the neighborhood, the kind of view that reminded everyone who saw it that Gianni was watching, always watching. "The store's called Quick Stop Market," Tony said, pointing to a property deed, owned by a shell company called Monroe Enterprises LLC. I traced it back through 4 different holding companies, but the actual owner is a guy named Vincent Patterson. "The manager," Gianni said. "Yeah, but here's where it gets interesting." Tony pulled out another document. Patterson doesn't own just this store. He owns 5 others, all in low-income neighborhoods, all operating on razor-thin margins that don't make sense given the locations and inventory. Gianni leaned back in his chair. "Money laundering. That'd be my guess, but it's clean, really clean. Whoever's doing his books knows what they're doing." Tony paused. "There's more. The security system in that store cost about 40 grand to install, for a place that probably makes that in profit over a year. He's protecting something, or watching something." Tony tapped another photo. "I pulled footage from a traffic camera down the street. Look at this." He showed Gianni a series of time-stamped images. Cars pulling up behind the Quick Stop, late at night. Men going in through the back door, staying for 5, 10 minutes, leaving with nothing visible. "How often?" Gianni asked. 3, 4 times a week. Always between 1 and 3 a.m. Always different guys, but..." Tony pulled out more photos. "I ran facial recognition on a few of them. Small-time dealers, mostly. Couple of enforcers for the Lucci family." The Lucci family. Gianni's jaw tightened. They'd been encroaching on his territory for months, operating in neighborhoods he'd controlled for years. He'd been preparing to address it, but quietly, carefully. Violence was expensive and drew attention. "So Patterson's running a drug operation out of the store," Gianni said. "Looks like it. Using the legitimate business as cover. Smart, actually. Who's going to suspect a shitty convenience store?" Tony hesitated. "You want me to handle it?" "No." Gianni's voice was flat. "Not yet. What about the girl?" Tony's expression shifted. "Maya Reyes, 26. No, criminal record. Came here 4 years ago from upstate. Place called Millbrook. Started at community college. Dropped out after 2 years. Why?" "Records don't say. But she started working at the Quick Stop about 9 months ago. Before that, she worked at a diner that closed. And before that, a laundromat." Tony paused. "She's sending money home. I tracked wire transfers, about $400 a month every month to a woman named Rosalie Reyes in Millbrook." "Mother?" "Probably. I'm still digging, but it looks like Rosalie's been in and out of hospitals, medical bills, a lot of them." Gianni absorbed this. $400 a month out of a cashier's salary. That was why Maya was working 10-hour night shifts. Why she couldn't afford to quit. "What about the bruises?" he asked. Tony shifted uncomfortably. "I put a guy on surveillance like you asked. She shows up to work with new ones every few days, different locations, arms, sometimes her face, once her neck. She covers them with makeup and long sleeves. Who's hitting her? That's where it gets complicated." Tony pulled out another photo. The guy from the back room, Derek Simmons. He's Patterson's cousin. Also has a record. Assault, possession, couple of parole violations. He lives in the apartment above the store with his girlfriend. "Which means he's there watching her all night," Gianni said. "Yeah, but it's not just him." Tony showed another photo. "This is Maya's boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend. It's hard to tell. Guy named Aaron Chen, works at a warehouse during the day, shows up at the store sometimes late at night. I've got footage of them arguing." Gianni studied the photo. Aaron was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of boyish face that probably made people trust him. But Gianni saw the tension in his posture, the way his hand was raised in the picture, finger pointing at Maya's face. "Arguments physical?" he asked. "My guy says yes, Last week, Aaron showed up at 2 a.m., started yelling at her about money. Maya tried to calm him down, said something about needing to send it to her mom. He grabbed her by the throat, pushed her against the wall. Tony's voice went flat. Derek came out, told Aaron to take it outside. Not because he gave a shit about Maya, just didn't want the cameras catching it. Johnny's hands curled into fists on the desk. So she's trapped, he said quietly. Can't quit because she needs the money. Can't report the abuse because she needs the job. Can't escape the boyfriend because she's probably financially dependent on him too. Looks like it. Tony hesitated. Boss, I gotta ask, why do you care? She's not family, she's not in the business. She's just some girl or working a shitty job. Gianni didn't answer immediately. Because how did you explain that sometimes you saw yourself in strangers? That sometimes the past reached up and grabbed you by the throat, demanding that you do something, anything to keep history from repeating? Just keep watching, he said finally. I want to know her routine. I want to know when Patterson's there, when Derek's there, when the boyfriend shows up. I want to know who else is involved in whatever they're running through that store. You planning to move on it? I'm planning to understand it first. Johnny stood, walking to the window. You don't break something before you know how it works. That's how you create collateral damage. Tony gathered his papers. All right, boss. I'll keep you updated. After he left, Gianni stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the neighborhood below. At the families walking home from dinner, at the kids playing basketball under the streetlights, at the old men sitting on stoops, watching the world go by. He'd built his empire on understanding that everything was connected, that every action had consequences that rippled outward in ways you couldn't always predict, that the most dangerous move was the one you made without thinking. So he would think, he would watch, he would understand exactly what Maya was trapped in before he decided how to free her. He returned to the quick stop 2 nights later. This time he brought questions instead of assumptions. It was 12:45 a.m. when he walked in, and Maya was alone at the register. No Derek, no Patterson, no other customers, just Maya, surrounded by fluorescent lights and stale air and the quiet desperation of minimum wage. She looked up when he entered, and this time there was definite recognition in her eyes. You again, she said. Me again. Johnny grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler. Quiet tonight? It's Tuesday. Tuesday's always slow. She paused. Are you going to keep coming here? Does it bother you if I do? She thought about that. I don't know yet. Honest. He liked that. He brought the water to the counter. She rang it up, $2 even, and he handed her a 5 again. You don't have to keep tipping me, she said. I know. Then why do you? Because you're working a job that doesn't pay enough, sending money home to someone who needs it, and dealing with people who hurt you. Gianni met her eyes. The least I can do is tip. Her face went pale. How did you? I notice things. That's... She swallowed hard. That's not normal. Normal people don't notice things like that. I'm not normal people. Yeah. Her voice was barely a whisper. I figured that out. They stood there for a moment, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, neither of them moving. Finally, Maya spoke. What do you want? She asked. Really? Because men like you, they don't come to places like this unless they want something. And I don't have anything to give. Men like me, Johnny repeated. Yeah. She lifted her chin slightly, a flash of defiance cutting through the fear. I know what you are. I grew up around guys like you, the ones who think they own everything, the ones who take what they want. And what do I want, Maya? I don't know, but it's not water at 1 a.m., I know that much. Smart. She was smart, smarter than she probably gave herself credit for. You're right, Johnny said. I don't need water. I have a refrigerator full of water, expensive water, water that costs more than you make in a week. Then why are you here? Because I saw something the first time I came in, and I can't unsee it. What did you see? A woman who's afraid, not of strangers, not of the neighborhood, but of the people who are supposed to keep her safe. Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back furiously. You need to stop. Stop what? Stop looking at me like that, like you know, like you care. Her voice cracked. Because even if it's true, Even if you do care, it doesn't matter. You can't help me. Nobody can help me. Why not? Because... She stopped, glancing toward the back room, toward the cameras, toward the door. Because this is my life. This is what I chose. And if I try to change it, if I try to leave, people get hurt. What people? People I love. Your mother, Johnny said. She went absolutely still. How do you know about my mother? I told you, I notice things. That's not... You can't just... She pressed her hands to her face, breathing hard. You need to leave. Right now. Before Derek comes out. Before something happens. What's going to happen? I don't know. But every time someone pays attention to me, every time someone asks questions, it gets worse. So please, just take your water and go. But Gianni didn't move. What if I could make it stop? He asked quietly. What? The fear, the bruises, the having to choose between your mother and your safety. He leaned forward slightly. What if I could make all of it stop? Maya stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. You can't. What if I could? You can't, she repeated, but her voice wavered. Nobody can. This is how things are. No, Johnny said. This is how things have been. That doesn't mean it's how they have to stay. She shook her head, tears finally spilling over. You don't understand. Derek, he's watching. Patterson, he knows everything that happens in this store. And Aaron, he... She stopped, wiping her eyes. He said, if I ever told anyone, if I ever tried to leave, he'd make sure my mom never got another dime. He'd make sure I never saw her again. Aaron doesn't have that kind of power. But Patterson does, and Derek does, and they're all... She stopped again, biting her lip hard. I've said too much. No, Johnny said gently. You haven't said nearly enough. The door at the back of the store opened. Derek emerged, eyes bloodshot, moving with that same jerky energy. He looked at Gianni, then at Maya's tear-stained face, and his expression darkened. Problem? He asked. No problem, Maya said quickly, wiping her face. Customer just needed help. Finding something. Looked like more than that. It wasn't. Derek moved closer, and Gianni saw the bulge under his jacket. Gun. Probably a 9mm. You again? Derek said, looking at Gianni. Thought I told you to find another store. This one's convenient. Johnny said mildly. Yeah, well, convenience ain't worth the hassle. Derek's hand drifted toward his waistband. So maybe you should inconvenience yourself somewhere else. Gianni could have ended this in 3 seconds. He could have drawn his own gun, a .45 he always carried, always within reach, and shown this punk exactly what happened when you threatened Gianni DeSantis. But Maya's eyes were on him, wide and terrified, silently begging him not to escalate. So instead, he simply picked up his water. Have a good night, he said. He walked to the door, paused, turned back one last time. Maya, he said, think about what I said. Then he left. From his car, he watched through the window as Derek grabbed Maya's arm, the bruised one, and yanked her close. Watched as he said something that made her flinch. Watched as she nodded quickly, desperately, trying to placate him. Johnny pulled out his phone, called Tony. Change of plans, he said. I need to know everything about Derek Simmons and Aaron Chen, where they live, where they go, who they talk to, who they owe money to, everything. When do you need it? Yesterday. Boss, what are you planning? Johnny watched as Derek released Maya and disappeared back into the office. Watched as Maya stood there, shaking, one hand pressed to her arm where he'd grabbed her. I'm planning to remind some people, Johnny said quietly, that fear only works if the person you're scaring doesn't have anyone scarier backing them up. He hung up, sat there in the darkness, watching, always watching, because that's what predators did. They watched, they waited, they learned their prey's patterns, their weaknesses, their fears, and then, when the moment was right, they struck. But Gianni wasn't hunting Maya. He was hunting the people who'd turned her into prey, and they had no idea what was coming. The information Tony delivered 2 days later painted a picture that was both clearer and uglier than Gianni had expected. They met in the back room of Rossini's, Gianni's restaurant, where the lighting was low and the walls were thick enough that conversations stayed private. Tony spread out files, photos, documents, the careful archaeology of other people's secrets. Derek Simmons, Tony began, tapping a police report. 3 assault charges, 2 convictions. Did 18 months in Rikers for beating his last girlfriend badly enough to put her in the hospital. Got out 2 years ago, violated parole twice. Somehow never went back. Someone protected him, Johnny said. Yeah, Patterson. Filed paperwork saying Derek was employed full-time, providing a stable residence. Parole board bought it. Tony pulled out another document. But here's the thing, Derek's not just Patterson's cousin. He's his enforcer. When Patterson needs someone roughed up, when he needs a message sent, Derek does it. And Maya? She's leverage. Tony showed surveillance photos. I tracked her routine. She doesn't just work at the Quick Stop. Every Monday and Thursday, a car picks her up after her shift, takes her to an apartment building in Astoria. She goes in for about 40 minutes, comes out looking worse than when she went in. What's in the apartment? Patterson's main operation. That's where they cut and package. The store's just a front and a drop point. Tony paused. And that's where they keep the girls. Johnny's blood went cold. Girls. 3 of them, as far as I can tell, all working at Patterson's various stores, all trapped the same way. Someone they love is being held over their head. Medical bills, debt, family members who need protection. Tony's voice hardened. Patterson finds people who are desperate and vulnerable, and he hooks them in, makes them complicit in his operation so they can't go to the cops. Uses their own love against them. And Derek keeps them in line. Yeah. Derek and the fear of what happens if they talk. Tony showed another photo. Maya emerging from the Astoria building with fresh bruises on her neck. They rotate the girls through the packaging operation, keeps them all afraid, keeps them all connected to the crime. If one goes down, they all go down. Gianni stood, pacing to the window. Outside, people walked by, unaware, living their lives, protected by his organization's careful maintenance of order, of control. But Maya wasn't protected. None of those girls were. What about Aaron? He asked. Aaron Chen is a piece of work. Tony's disgust was clear. Met Maya about a year ago, started dating her, seemed normal at first. Then she started working for Patterson, started sending money home to her mom. Aaron saw an opportunity. He's taking her money. Not just that, he's in debt, gambling mostly, owes about 30 grand to some very unpleasant people. So he's been convincing Maya to give him her earnings. Threatens to tell Patterson she's stealing if she doesn't. Threatens to cut off her mother's money. Threatens to hurt her mother directly. He's using her the same way Patterson is. Exactly. And here's the kicker. Tony pulled out the final document. Aaron's connected to the Lucci family. Not directly, he's too small time, but he's doing errands for them, which means Patterson's operation might actually be funded by the Luccis. They've been looking for a way into this territory for years. Gianni absorbed this. The Lucci family, Patterson, Derek, Aaron, all of them circling around Maya and girls like her, feeding on their fear, growing fat on their desperation. Options, he said. Legal, call the cops, let them raid the operation, but that means Maya and the other girls get arrested too. Even if they testify, even if they cut deals, their lives are over. They'll have records. Patterson will make bail and come after them. The Luccis will send someone to clean up loose ends. Illegal? We move on the operation directly, take out Derek and Patterson, sever the Lucci connection, but that means war, and war is expensive. Johnny turned from the window. Third option? Tony smiled grimly. You already know. Say it anyway. We make Patterson an offer he can't refuse. We convince him that his operation is suddenly more trouble than it's worth. We convince the Luccis that this territory isn't available. We convince Aaron that Maya is off limits. Tony paused. And we do it all without anyone knowing you were involved. How? By making them more afraid of what might happen. Then they are greedy for what they have. Johnny nodded slowly. It was risky. It required precision. But it was the only way to protect Maya, without destroying her in the process. Set it up, he said. I want to talk to Patterson first. Alone. Vincent Patterson was not a stupid man. He'd built his operation carefully over 10 years, starting with a single store and expanding slowly, methodically. He'd learned to stay below the radar. He'd learned to never get too greedy. He'd learned exactly how much pressure he could apply to people before they broke in ways that attracted attention. But he'd never learned what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that pressure, not until he got the phone call. It came at 3 a.m., 3 days after Gianni's last visit to the quick stop. An unknown number. Patterson almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Vincent Patterson," he said. "You don't know me," said a voice on the other end. Calm, measured, dangerous. "But I know you." Patterson sat up in bed. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been watching your operation, the stores, the back room, the girls, the connection to the Lucci family." A pause. Everything, fear, cold and sharp, slid down Patterson's spine. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do, and you're going to listen very carefully because I'm only going to say this once." The voice, Johnny's voice, though Patterson didn't know that, continued. "In approximately 6 hours, you're going to receive a visit from someone representing my interests. You're going to sit down with this person, you're going to listen to what they have to say, and then you're going to make a choice." "A choice about what?" "About whether you want to keep your operation or keep your life." Patterson's mouth went dry. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm informing you, there's a difference." The voice remained perfectly calm. "The Lucci family doesn't own this territory. They never will. And your operation, using vulnerable women as mules, taking advantage of their desperation, that ends now. You can't just... I can, and I will. The question is whether you cooperate or whether I have to make you cooperate. Cooperation is cleaner, easier, better for everyone involved. And if I refuse, then Derek Simmons will be arrested tomorrow for parole violation. The evidence will be airtight. While he's inside, certain people will be informed that he's been talking to federal investigators about the Lucci family's operations. Within a week, he'll be dead." Patterson's blood ran cold. "You wouldn't. You'll also receive a visit from the IRS about your business finances. Turns out, laundering drug money creates a very clear paper trail when someone knows where to look. You'll be charged with tax evasion, money laundering, and racketeering. You'll lose everything. This is insane. The girls you're using, Maya Reyes, Jennifer Sullivan, Keisha Davis, will be offered protection and immunity in exchange for testimony. They'll take it. They'll bury you." Patterson was shaking now. "Who the fuck are you?" "I'm the person who's giving you a way out. My representative will arrive at your office at 9 a.m. You'll listen to their offer, and you'll accept it. And if I don't, then by this time tomorrow you'll be in a cell. Derek will be dead, and the Luccis will be looking for who burned their distribution network." A pause. "Choose wisely, Mr. Patterson." The line went dead. Patterson sat in the darkness, his phone clutched in his hand, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd built this operation on fear, on understanding that people would do almost anything to protect the ones they loved, on exploiting that desperate love until there was nothing left but compliance. But now, someone was using the same tactics on him. And whoever it was, they were much, much better at it. At 9 a.m. exactly, Tony walked into the Quick Stop's office. Patterson was already there, looking like he hadn't slept. His hands trembled slightly as he poured himself coffee from a machine that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in months. "Vincent Patterson?" Tony asked, though he knew the answer. "Who wants to know?" Tony closed the door behind him, drew the blinds, sat down without being invited. "I represent certain interests in this city," he said. "Interests that have become concerned about your operation." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do, so let's skip the denial and get to the negotiation." Tony pulled out a folder, spreading documents across Patterson's desk. "This is what's going to happen. You're going to sell all 5 of your stores. The buyers are already lined up. Legitimate businesses, fair market value, clean transaction. The money will go into an account I've already set up for you." "Why the hell would I?" "Because the alternative is everything I outlined on the phone last night." Tony's voice remained calm. "Within 1 hour of this meeting, if you haven't agreed, Derek gets arrested. The IRS gets an anonymous tip. The Luccis get informed that you've been skimming their product. And the girls get offers they won't refuse." Patterson's face went pale. "This is extortion." "No, this is business. Extortion would be if I was taking something from you. I'm giving you an exit strategy. You walk away clean, with enough money to start over somewhere else. Somewhere far from here. And the girls? The girls are no longer your concern. Tony leaned forward. Here's what happens to them. They quit, effective immediately. Any debt they think they owe you is forgiven. Any threats made against their families are void. They walk away, and you never contact them again. The Lucchis will never allow this. The Lucchis have already been informed that this territory is closed to them, permanently. They understand the situation. Who the fuck are you people? Tony smiled thinly. We're the people who own the city. We just don't like advertising it. He pushed the papers closer. You have 30 minutes to decide, Tony said. Sign these documents, agree to the terms, and by end of business today, you'll have $1.2 million in your account. Refuse, and by this time tomorrow, you'll have nothing. Not your stores, not your freedom, not your life. Patterson stared at the documents. His hands were shaking badly now. What about Derek? He asked. Derek gets on a bus to Florida tonight with $10,000 and a warning. If he ever comes back to the city, if he ever contacts Maya or any of the other girls, he disappears, permanently. And Aaron Chen? Aaron's being handled separately. Patterson picked up a pen, put it down, picked it up again. If I do this, he said quietly, I want protection. From the Lucchis, from whoever you work for, from all of it. You'll have it, as long as you leave and never come back. Patterson signed. His hands shook the entire time, but he signed every document, the sales agreement, the release forms, the non-disclosure agreement that threatened consequences so severe Tony didn't even need to explain them. When it was done, Tony gathered the papers and stood. You made the right choice, he said. Did I? Patterson looked up, and there was something broken in his eyes. I spent 10 years building this. 10 years. You spent 10 years hurting people, Tony corrected. This is you paying for it with money instead of blood. Trust me, Mr. Patterson, you got the better deal. He left. As he walked out of the quick stop for the last time, he saw Maya at the register, serving an early morning customer. She glanced up, met his eyes for just a second, then looked away. She didn't know yet. But she would. Aaron Chen was easier. He was leaving his warehouse job at 5 p.m. when a car pulled up beside him, a black sedan with tinted windows, the kind of car that meant trouble. 2 men got out. Large men, men who knew how to hurt people efficiently. Aaron tried to run. He made it about 10 feet before they caught him, dragging him into the alley beside the warehouse. One of them, the bigger one, slammed him against the brick wall hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. Aaron Chen, the man said. It wasn't a question. Aaron couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, could only nod. You know a girl named Maya Reyes. Another nod, more frantic this time. You've been hitting her, taking her money, threatening her mother. I don't, she. The man's hand closed around Aaron's throat. Not tight enough to choke him, but tight enough to make him understand how easily it could. Here's what's going to happen, the man said, his voice perfectly calm. You're going to leave Maya alone. Forever. You're never going to call her, text her, see her, or think about her. You're going to forget she exists. Okay, Aaron gasped. Okay, I will, I promise. I'm not done. The grip tightened slightly. Your gambling debt, the $30,000 you owe, it's paid, clean slate. But if you gamble again, if you borrow money again, if you get into debt again, you don't get another bailout. You get buried, understood? Yes, I understand. And if you ever go near Maya or her mother, if you ever threaten her again, if you ever even say her name, the man leaned in close. They'll find pieces of you in 3 different states. Are we clear? We're clear, I swear. The man released him. Aaron slumped against the wall, gasping. One more thing, the man said. This conversation never happened. You never saw us. You don't know why you're leaving Maya alone, you just are. Because if you talk about this, if you tell anyone about this conversation, we'll know, and we'll come back, and next time we won't be this nice. They left. Aaron stood there in the alley, shaking, tears running down his face, understanding for the first time in his life what it felt like to be utterly powerless. To be afraid of forces he couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't escape. He never contacted Maya again. Gianni returned to the quick stop one final time. It was 11:30 p.m., 5 days after Tony's visit to Patterson. The under new management sign was already up in the window. The new owner, a retired cop who'd bought the store legitimately, who had no idea who'd really arranged the sale, was implementing changes, better pay, reasonable hours, actual security. But tonight, Maya was still working. Her last shift before the transition. She looked up when Gianni entered, and this time, something was different in her eyes. Not fear, questions. "You," she said. "Me. Patterson's gone. Derek's gone. Aaron," she swallowed. "Aaron called me yesterday, told me he was sorry, that we were done, that I should have a good life." She paused. He was crying. Gianni said nothing. "The new owner offered me a different position, day shift, better pay, normal hours." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "How is any of this possible?" "Sometimes things change," Gianni said simply. "Things don't just change. Not like this, not overnight." She came out from behind the register, moving closer. "What did you do?" "I reminded some people that there are consequences for their actions. You're the one who called Patterson. You're the one who sent those men to Aaron." It wasn't a question. "Does it matter?" "Yes." Her voice cracked. "Yes, it matters, because I need to know if I'm free or if I just traded one cage for another." Gianni looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who'd been beaten down so many times that even rescue felt like a trap. "You're free," he said quietly. "The job is yours if you want it, but if you don't, there are others. The debt you thought you had, it's gone. The threats against your mother, empty. The people who hurt you, gone or too afraid to come back." "Why?" The tears spilled over now. "Why would you do all this for someone you don't even know?" "Because someone should have done it for my mother," Gianni said. "And nobody did." Maya stared at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Nothing. People like you always want something. Not from you." Gianni stepped back toward the door. "Live your life, Maya. Send money to your mother without having to choose between her and your safety. Work a job that doesn't destroy you. Find someone who treats you the way you deserve to be treated." He paused. "That's all I want. For you to have the chance my mother never had." "I don't even know your name," she said. "You don't need to. Will I see you again?" "No." She nodded slowly, tears still streaming down her face. Then, unexpectedly, she crossed the distance between them and hugged him. A brief, tight embrace that spoke of gratitude too big for words. When she stepped back, she was smiling through her tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Whoever you are, thank you." Gianni nodded once. Then he turned and walked out of the quick stop. For the last time. As he drove away, he saw her through the window, standing in the fluorescent light, one hand pressed to her mouth, her shoulders shaking with sobs. But they were different sobs than before. Before, she'd cried from fear. Now she cried from relief, from hope, from the sudden, dizzying possibility that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was finally over. 3 months later, Gianni received a letter. It came to his office, addressed to "The Man Who Helped Me," care of Rossini's restaurant. The return address was from Millbrook, New York. Tony brought it to him, eyebrows raised. "Scanned for anthrax. It's clean." "Who's it from?" "Woman named Rosalie Reyes. Ring any bells?" Gianni took the letter, opened it. Inside was a single page, handwritten in shaky script. "Dear sir, I don't know your name. I don't know how to find you, but my daughter Maya told me that someone helped her when she needed it most. Someone who asked for nothing in return. I'm writing to say thank you, not just for what you did for Maya, but for what you did for me. You see, I was dying, the cancer was everywhere, and I couldn't afford treatment. Maya was killing herself trying to send me money, trying to keep me alive. But 3 months ago, everything changed. Maya's situation changed. She got a better job, and somehow, she won't tell me how, my medical bills got paid, all of them, by an anonymous donor. I'm in remission now. The doctors say I have a real chance. My daughter has a real chance. I don't know why you helped us. I don't know what we did to deserve your kindness, but I want you to know that you saved 2 lives, not just one. Thank you." With all my heart, Rosalie Reyes. Gianni read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his desk drawer, next to a photo he kept there. A photo of a woman with dark hair and kind eyes, standing in front of a house that no longer existed. His mother, she died when he was 16. Heart attack, the doctor said. But Gianni knew it was more than that. It was years of stress, Years of fear, years of choosing between medicine and food, between safety and rent. Years of being trapped. "You okay, boss?" Tony asked. "Yeah." Johnny closed the drawer. "I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. He was thinking about all the women like Maya, all the people trapped in situations they couldn't escape, ground down by systems designed to exploit their desperation. He couldn't save them all, but maybe he didn't have to save them all. Maybe saving one was enough. 6 months after that night in the Quick Stop, Maya Reyes walked across a stage to receive her associate degree in business administration. She'd re-enrolled in community college after the new job gave her regular hours, after her mother's cancer went into remission, after Aaron disappeared from her life like smoke, after Derek and Patterson vanished so completely it was like they'd never existed. After everything changed, she scanned the audience as she received her diploma, looking for her mother in the crowd. Rosalie was there, thinner than before, but alive, smiling, crying happy tears. But Maya was also looking for someone else. A man in an expensive suit who'd walked into a convenience store and noticed what no one else had seen, who'd cared when he had no reason to care, who'd changed her life and asked for nothing in return. She didn't see him. She hadn't expected to. But as she left the auditorium, diploma in hand, mother at her side, she saw a black sedan parked across the street. Tinted windows, the kind of car that meant something. The back window rolled down just an inch, just enough for her to see a hand raise in acknowledgement. Then, the window rolled up and the car drove away. Maya stood there on the sidewalk, watching it disappear into traffic. "Who was that?" her mother asked. "Nobody," Maya said, smiling through sudden tears. "Just someone I used to know." But that night, when she got home to her small apartment, the one she could finally afford, in a building with actual security, she wrote a letter of her own. "Dear Sir, I don't know if this will reach you. I don't know if you'll read it, but I wanted you to know that I graduated today. Business administration. It's not much, but it's mine. My mom is doing better. She's in remission. She asks about you sometimes, asks how you knew to help us. I tell her I don't know because I don't, not really. But I think maybe you helped us because nobody helped someone you loved, and you didn't want history to repeat. If that's true, then I want you to know it didn't repeat. You changed it. You changed everything. I'm going to start my own business someday. A real one. Something that helps people the way you helped me. I'm going to treat my employees fairly. I'm going to notice when they're afraid. I'm going to be the person who stops the cycle instead of continuing it, because you showed me that's possible. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for caring when you didn't have to. Thank you for giving me my life back. I hope you know what you did mattered. Always, Maya." She sent the letter to Rossini's restaurant, hoping it would find its way to him. It did. Johnny read it in his office, alone, with the city lights glittering outside his window. Then he put it in the drawer next to Rosalie's letter, next to his mother's photo, next to the other reminders of why he did what he did. Not for power, not for money, but for moments like this, moments when the powerful used their power to protect instead of exploit, moments when fear was replaced by hope, moments when someone who'd been invisible was finally seen. He closed the drawer, turned back to his work. There were other businesses to run, other territories to protect, other people who needed reminding that this city had rules, and those rules applied to everyone. But sometimes, late at night, when the city was quiet and the weight of his empire felt heavier than usual, Johnny would think about a terrified cashier in a convenience store, and he would remember that power wasn't about how much you could take, it was about how much you could give.